Have you ever wanted something so intensely and felt so guilty about wanting it that you actually hoped you'd get caught?
Like you actively want to be punished.
Yeah, exactly. There's this bizarre human impulse where, the anxiety of getting away with something feels heavier than the actual consequence of the act itself.
Right, it's the anticipation.
Exactly. It's this psychological knot where desire, guilt, and just this desperate need for a clean slate all sort of tangled together.
And that specific, messy intersection is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
Welcome in, everyone. So the source material you sent us for this deep dive is, well, it's a really fascinating lens into that exact phenomenon.
It really is. We're looking at a piece of poetry titled Vita Nova, which translates from Latin to new life. And what makes this text so commanding is just its footprint. I mean, it is only 13 lines long. And within those few lines, it constructs this completely dense, layered psychological architecture.
When you look at the text you sent over, it might seem like something you could, skim in 10 seconds. But our mission today is to do a really deliberate conceptual teardown of these 13 lines. This poem maps out a really intense trajectory.
It really does.
It starts with this entirely physical, almost predatory consumption, right? And then it violently shifts into a state of moral panic.
And eventually bottoms out into this plea for total ego death.
Yeah, like spiritual surrender. So to understand the mechanics of that final surrender, the new life, we have to start where the text starts.
The physical intake. The conceptual beginning of this whole psychological arc is entirely visceral.
Yeah.
The opening lines read, "She, delectable and exquisite delicacy."
One of a kind, a rare find.
She goes down smooth, sweet, lingering aftertaste.
The sensory focus here is just unrelenting. But I actually struggled a bit with how to interpret this opening.
How so?
Well, is it supposed to be romantic? Because calling a person a delicacy that goes down smooth feels less like an expression of love and more like gluttony.
Yeah, I totally see that.
Feels purely transactional. Like the subject of the poem exists only to be consumed by the speaker. Like eating this impossibly rich, decadent dessert at a high-end restaurant.
That instinct hits the nail on the head, honestly. We're looking at absolute objectification here.
Okay, so it isn't romantic.
No, not at all. But it's operating through a very specific mechanism, which is the cognitive overlap between hunger and desire.
Oh, right.
Evolutionarily speaking, the human brain maps abstract emotional cravings onto the physical survival mechanism of eating.
Which is why we use words like devour or sweet when talking about attraction.
Exactly. The brain is processing intense obsession using the exact same neural pathways it uses to process like a massive caloric reward.
That makes perfect sense of the vocabulary. Delectable, delicacy, sweet. The speaker isn't describing a partner. They're describing a dopamine hit.
Right. And the framing removes all agency from the subject. The she in the text has no voice, no action, no internal life whatsoever.
She's framed entirely by her effect on the speaker's palate.
Yeah, and looking at the phrasing, she goes down smooth. We're moving away from the concept of a nourishing meal and into the territory of an intoxicant.
Like a rare, high-proof spirit.
Exactly. It alters the state of mind, lowers inhibitions, and provides this temporary, selfish euphoria.
And pacing plays a huge role here, too. When reading these lines, the punctuation in the line breaks. They force a very specific rhythm.
Yeah, the staccato feel.
Right. One of a kind, a rare find. It forces a deliberate slowing down of time. It really mimics the act of luxuriating.
That's a great way to put it.
Think about the physical mechanics of tasting something incredibly rare and expensive. The universe shrinks down to just the sensory receptors on the tongue.
Nothing else matters.
Right. There's no past, no future, no consequence. Just the immediate selfish extraction of pleasure.
But the sweet lingering aftertaste is the crucial bridge here. While the initial consumption happens in a vacuum, the aftertaste persists.
It's the biological trace left behind.
Yeah, after the act is finished. And physiologically, this is where the high breaks. The dopamine spikes, the indulgence is consumed, and then the brain has to process the chemical drop-off.
But that purely physical high cannot sustain itself. Once the active taste fades into a passive aftertaste, the speaker is left in a void.
And that is where the psychology of this text takes a massive dark turn.
It's jarring. The transition in the middle of this poem is startling. We leave the physical tongue and are immediately thrust into a tortured mind.
The text pivots from the sensory to the moral with terrifying speed.
Yeah, let's look at that middle section. It reads, "I have indulged in the forbidden you, my sin must be avenged."
I yearn to suffer the consequences. What price must I pay?
We've gone from a culinary review to a frantic moral accounting in like one sentence.
It's intense.
But I really need to push back on the severity of this reaction here. Why jump straight to avenging a sin? It feels so disproportionate to me.
You think it's an overreaction?
Yeah. The speaker tasted a delicacy, and suddenly they're demanding cosmic retribution. The phrase, "I yearn to suffer the consequences," is a massive escalation.
It is.
Why would anyone actively invite their own destruction over an indulgence?
Well, it speaks to the psychological mechanism of homeostasis.
Okay, unpack that for me.
When a system swings too far in one direction, in this case, into extreme intoxicating euphoria, it violently pulls the emergency brake to restore balance.
Oh, I see.
So the guilt is the biological and psychological counter-regulatory response. The speaker isn't just experiencing standard regret.
They're experiencing a moral, neurochemical withdrawal.
Exactly.
So the severity of the guilt is a direct mathematical response to the intensity of the pleasure.
Exactly that. It is a transactional view of morality. Notice the financial language creeping in.
Right. What price must I pay?
Yeah, the speaker has extracted this immense value from the forbidden indulgence, and now the ledger is dangerously unbalanced.
The psychological weight of carrying that unearned pleasure is just intolerable.
Yes.
Think about the mechanism of debt. Taking on a massive, high-interest loan gives you incredible, immediate purchasing power.
But the moment the money is spent,
You are left with a crushing anxiety of the looming repayment. The suspense of waiting for the collection agency is so heavy, so paralyzing, that eventually a person might actually want the collectors to seize their assets just to end the tension.
just to get it over with.
Exactly. The anticipation of the consequence becomes worse than the consequence itself.
That really highlights the function of the word avenged. My sin must be avenged. Usually a person seeks to avenge a wrong done to them or someone they love, right?
Yeah, you avenge a theft, you avenge a betrayal.
But here, the speaker demands that their own action be avenged upon themselves.
They have split into two entities. They are simultaneously the perpetrator who stole the forbidden fruit and the judge demanding restitution for the theft.
And by splitting the self into the sinner and the punisher, they're trying to regain control of a situation that has completely overwhelmed them.
That is fascinating.
But there is an even deeper psychological layer to the phrase, "I yearn to suffer." It ties into what we might call the addiction cycle of the soul.
Okay, let's unpack that. The addiction cycle of the soul. How does yearning for suffering feed an addiction?
Well, if the indulgence was minor, the punishment would be minor. But by demanding a monumental, devastating punishment, the speaker is subconsciously validating the importance of the desire. The suffering elevates the sin.
Oh, wow.
It proves that the exquisite delicacy was so powerful, so universally disruptive, that it requires suffering to balance the scales.
So the yearning for punishment isn't just about restoring order. It's about proving that the high was worth the destruction. It makes the initial act feel profound instead of just petty or weak. The guilt becomes the second course of the meal.
That's a brilliant way to phrase it.
They savored the sweetness, and now they're actively trained to savor the bitterness of the condemnation. It's a self-contained loop of emotional indulgence.
Which sets up the central problem of the text. The speaker has demanded a price. What price must I pay?
And the final stanza provides the answer to that demand.
But it subverts all expectations of what punishment looks like. It isn't a smiting, it isn't hellfire.
The consequence is total, absolute surrender. The shift in language here is stunning. The text moves from demanding payment to begging for erasure. The final lines read, "I beg for more as I lay at your shore. Come, cleanse me."
Baptize me in your raging river. Release your waves to wash over me. Appease my thirst for you.
Make me whole again, anew.
This brings us back to the title you shared with us at the start, Vita Nova. We are witnessing the mechanics of how this new life is constructed.
But the paradox at the core of these lines is staggering. We have to look closely at who is being addressed here.
Right. Who is the "your" in "lay at your shore"?
It's the she from the beginning, the exact same entity.
The very source of the forbidden sin, the intoxicating delicacy that caused the fractured morality and the demand for vengeance, is now being begged to act as the purifying element.
The contagion and the cure are the exact same thing. That is a massive inversion of power. In the opening lines, the speaker was the apex predator. They were consuming, judging the flavor entirely in control of the experience.
And now,
Now they're completely immobilized, they're laying at the shore, powerless, asking a force larger than themselves to wash over them. The consumer has become the consumed.
it is the ultimate relinquishing of agency. When the burden of free will and the guilt of having chosen to indulge in the forbidden becomes too heavy, the psychological response is to seek an environment where free will is impossible.
Think about stepping out of a really chaotic, exhausting environment and standing completely still in a massive downpour. You just let go of all control and let the storm wash everything away. It's a total reset button. Instead of the cliche of standing in the rain to wash away guilt, think of this through the lens of sensory overload versus sensory deprivation.
Oh, that's interesting.
The speaker's mind has been redlining. The sensory input of the taste, combined with the screaming moral panic of the sin, is like a psychological deafening.
Right.
So begging for the raging river is like seeking a sensory deprivation tank, but a violent one. It's a craving for an environment so overwhelming that the ego cannot exist within it. You don't have to make choices in a raging river. You just get carried away.
And that loss of ego is historically and mythologically tied to the concept of baptism and moving water. A river is not a stagnant pool.
Right. It has current, it has force.
In classical mythology, we see this with the river Lethe, the river of unmindfulness. Souls would drink from it to completely wipe their memories before being reincarnated into a new life.
So it's not just about getting the dirt off. It's about a complete obliteration of the previous identity.
A raging river destroys the landscape before it creates a new one. The speaker isn't asking for a gentle absolution.
No, not at all.
They are asking for the violent destruction of the self that committed the sin in the first place. That is the only way to achieve the Vita Nova. The old self must drown.
The shift in the sensory vocabulary highlights that desperation too. We move from taste to thirst. Appease my thirst for you.
That's a crucial distinction.
Right. A delicacy is a luxury. You can choose to walk away from a rare find. The thirst is a biological mandate. Thirst is primal.
Desire has mutated. It started as a superficial, luxurious indulgence, but through the crucible of guilt and moral panic, that desire has been forged into a fundamental requirement for survival.
Wow.
The speaker no longer just wants the forbidden entity, their continued psychological existence depends on it.
Which brings us to the final plea. Make me whole again, anew. The acknowledgement of brokenness. The sin and the guilt have shattered the speaker into those two conflicting entities we discussed earlier. They require the overwhelming force of the river to fuse those pieces back together.
It is the ultimate resolution of the tension built throughout the 13 lines. The text provides a masterful blueprint of how human psychology processes overwhelming desire.
So, synthesizing the journey you've brought us on today, looking at this text, it is incredible how efficiently it moves through the layers of the human condition.
It really is.
It begins strictly in the physical domain. The palate, the objectification, the selfish extraction of the smooth intoxicant.
Then the biological aftertaste triggers the psychological domain.
Right, the mind recoils.
Exactly. The mind recoils from the euphoria, slamming the brakes via moral panic, seeking homeostasis through the transactional demand to be avenged.
And finally, it transcends both body and mind, arriving at the spiritual domain. The realization that the ego cannot bear the weight of its own actions.
Leading to that desperate plea.
Right, resulting in the plea to be obliterated and rebuilt by the very force that destroyed it in the first place. Trading the luxury of taste for the survival instinct of thirst.
It demonstrates that true obsession is never just about pleasure. True obsession requires the punishment, the guilt, and the surrender to feel complete.
It is a remarkable piece of psychological architecture. But you know, as we wrap up this analysis, there is a mechanical flaw in the speaker's ultimate goal that we really have to address. A final lingering thought for you, the listener, to examine based on that closing plea.
The concept of being made whole again, anew.
Right. Let's look at the mechanics of that outcome. The speaker begs for the raging river. They beg for the baptism. They want the old sinful self to be drowned and washed away so they can achieve this Vita Nova, this entirely new life.
Completely wiped ledger.
But if the mythic river does its job, if the memory is wiped, the guilt is washed away, and the psychological slate is scrubbed entirely clean, doesn't that inherently recreate the exact conditions from the beginning of the poem?
Oh, wow. That is the trap.
If you are made completely new, you no longer have the memory of the guilt. You no longer have the moral panic. You just have a fresh palate.
And you're standing right back in front of the exquisite delicacy.
Exactly. It reframes the entire text. It stops being a linear journey from sin to salvation, and it becomes a closed loop.
Is this Vita Nova actually a permanent state of spiritual salvation, or is it merely the necessary psychological reset button that allows the speaker to commit the exact same transgression all over again?
That's the terrifying reality. The raging river might not carry you to a new shore at all. It just washes you right back to the beginning of the addiction cycle.
It implies that the quest for purity is really just a mechanism to renew the capacity for indulgence. The new life is just fuel for the old sin.
And that is the true weight of the text you brought to us today. It doesn't just describe an experience, it traps the reader in the mechanics of it. Thank you for sending over such a dense, fiercely intelligent piece of writing for us to dismantle.
It's been fantastic.
It proves that the size of a text has absolutely no bearing on the mass of its ideas. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We truly appreciate it. Talk to us in the comments below. As always, like, subscribe, and get notified. We will catch you on the next Beyond the Words Presents. Peace.